The summer I turned 8 was when I first realized how deeply I valued connection. My family had just moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood, and making friends didn't come naturally to me. One day, a baseball rolled into our yard, and behind it came Kenny, a wiry kid with an infectious grin. He didn't ask if I wanted to play, he simply handed me the bat. That moment sparked a lifelong friendship. By middle school, Don had joined our circle. He was the brains of the group, always coming up with elaborate plans for our adventures. Whether it was building tree houses or sneaking into the local swimming pool after dark, Don's schemes rarely failed. The three of us became inseparable, navigating the ups and downs of adolescence as a unit. High school brought its challenges. Kenny's parents divorced, leaving him struggling to find stability. Don, ever resourceful, kept us grounded by organizing study groups and football practices. We weren't just friends, we were brothers, forging a bond that weathered every storm. It was during these years that I met Becky, a quiet girl who seemed drawn to our chaotic energy. She eventually became my anchor, balancing out my impulsive tendencies. College saw us scattered geographically, but not emotionally. Kenny pursued engineering, Don law, and I business. Our paths diverged, but we made a pact. No matter how busy life became, we'd always make time for an annual trip, a tradition that started with fishing weekends and grew into something sacred. These trips weren't just about relaxation. They were a reminder of who we were before careers and families reshaped our lives. As adulthood settled in, our group expanded to include our spouses. Becky fit seamlessly, her wit and warmth adding a new dimension to our gatherings. The trips evolved, becoming a blend of adventure and family bonding. But over time, subtle shifts began to surface. Missed gatherings, strained conversations. The ease we once shared started to fray at the edges. Looking back, I can see the signs that things weren't as solid as they seemed. Becky's laughter at Kenny's jokes grew quieter, Don's clever remarks felt more barbed, and my own enthusiasm waned. Yet I clung to the hope that our next trip, this trip, would reignite the spark we once had. That hope is what kept me packing my bags, even as doubt clouded my mind. So as I stood there, ready to leave, I thought about the memories we'd built and the ones we'd yet to create. I told myself this trip was a chance to reclaim the joy and camaraderie that had defined so much of my life. Little did I know it would unravel more than I ever expected. The trip was supposed to be an escape, a break from the grind and a chance to recharge with old friends. I'd meticulously prepared for this week-long fishing retreat, packing gear and supplies with anticipation. Yet as I zipped up my last bag, a nagging sense of unease took root. These trips, once filled with laughter and camaraderie, now carried an unfamiliar weight. Over the years, my friends and I had shared countless adventures, building a bond as solid as family. But this time, something felt different. Off even. Originally, the plan included everyone, our close-knit group of 3 men and our wives, but one by one, the pieces began to fall apart. Kenny couldn't join us until later in the week due to a critical business obligation, which meant his wife Pam stayed home. Then Don's work commitments forced him to cut his trip short, and his wife followed suit. When my wife Becky learned she'd be the only spouse attending, she opted out as well. What was meant to be a lively, collective getaway now felt like a shadow of its potential, leaving me disheartened and questioning the point of it all. When my wife Becky found out that none of the other wives would be coming, she opted out too. The trip wasn't shaping up to be the fun, lively getaway we were used to, and it left me feeling disappointed. Normally, these trips were a chance for all of us to bond and unwind together. Honestly, I often looked forward to them not just for the camaraderie, but because they sparked some of the most passionate moments in my marriage. Before, during, and after these getaways, Becky and I always seemed to connect in ways that reignited the spark between us. The idea of missing out on that was more upsetting than skipping time with my friends. That said, Becky and I had been particularly active in the days leading up to the trip. We'd been so intimate, it was almost exhausting. At times, I just wanted to sleep, but she kept initiating, and I wasn't about to complain. It was our usual routine before I went away, and I enjoyed it. However, for the rest of the year, our bed life often felt stale. Sure, we were still intimate, but it was maybe twice a week at best, and it felt more like a routine than a genuine connection. It was a far cry from the early days of our marriage when any opportunity or quiet corner seemed like the perfect place to be together. Over time, things had gradually shifted, but about 5 years ago, the changes became undeniable. What had once been a passionate, frequent connection dwindled to just a couple of times a week. Often, when I wanted to be close, Becky would turn me down. At first, I'd get frustrated, But after a few arguments, I stopped pushing. If she refused enough times, I'd just deal with my feelings on my own. That Thursday night, I found myself back in that same position. I was in my office, taking a break from packing, nursing a beer. Becky was upstairs putting the kids to bed. I heard her head downstairs to the kitchen, and after a few minutes, she walked into the living room with a glass of wine. She sat down across from me, her face serious. "Honey," she began, her voice hesitant, "I need to talk to you about something important." The tone in her voice set me on edge. "What is it?" I asked. "Please promise me you'll let me say everything before you react," she said, her voice trembling. "I know this is going to upset you, but I can't keep it bottled up anymore. I've been scared to tell you, but I have to." My stomach churned. Becky looked both frightened and determined, and I knew whatever was coming would change everything. She took a deep breath and a long sip of her wine before continuing. "I know you've been unhappy with our bed life lately. I haven't been satisfied either. I love you, Dave, but you just don't excite me anymore." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, speechless. "And David," she went on, "I want us to stay married. You're an amazing dad, a great provider, and my best friend. But I need more than what we have in the bedroom." Anger bubbled up inside me, but before I could say a word, she raised her hand to stop me. "You promised to let me finish," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay silent. "I've met someone," she confessed, her voice trembling. "Someone I've known for a while. He makes me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. I can't go on pretending anymore. I've decided to be with him, to be intimate with him. I didn't want to hide this from you because I still care about you, but you need to understand, I can't keep going through the motions with you when I feel nothing." I shot out of my chair, my anger exploding. "You're cheating on me! Are you kidding me? How could you do this?" Becky stood her ground, stepping in front of me and pushing me back down. "Sit down, David," she snapped. "I told you this would be hard to hear, but you promised to listen." I sank back into my chair, stunned. "I have already spoken with Don about the divorce laws here," she said coldly. "You can't afford to leave me. If you try, the court will award me the house, custody of the kids, and 2/3 of your income for alimony and child support. You'd walk away with half the savings and your retirement, but it wouldn't be enough for you to live comfortably. For your own sake and for the kids, you need to accept this." Her words felt like a sledgehammer. She softened slightly as she continued. "I still care about you, David. I'll let you be with me sometimes, and we don't have to change anything else about our life, but I'm going to be with him. Sometimes I'll stay out all night, or we might go on trips together. You just have to learn to live with it." I sat there, paralyzed, as my world crumbled around me. My mind was spinning as I tried to absorb everything Becky had said. A storm of emotions, anger, despair, and a sense of powerlessness raged inside me, leaving me frozen and speechless. Becky got up and moved back to her chair, sitting with an unsettling calmness. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Finally, I said, "You're nothing but a cheating liar. I thought I knew you. I thought you loved me. But now you're just shattering my heart. How long has this been going on, and who is this guy?" Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned icy. "Throwing insults won't help you, David. You'd better let go of your little grudge and start adapting. As for how long or who, that's none of your business, and don't even think about digging into it, because if you do, you'll regret it." She crossed her arms and continued, her voice eerily composed. "I've had a lover for a while now. Hiding it was exhausting, constantly sneaking around, making sure there was no trace for you to find. I finally decided it was time to be honest. I'm tired of rushing home to clean up or pretending everything's fine. I'm done with the lies. This way you know what's happening, and I can take time for myself while you look after the kids." Her words cut like a knife, but she wasn't finished. "And no, I won't tell you who it is. If I did, you'd probably lose your temper and do something stupid, and then you'd end up in jail or the hospital. Either way, it'd be bad for all of us, especially the kids. They need their father, and I need you working to support this family. So don't even think about trying to interfere. If you do, there will be consequences. I've made sure of that." The confidence in her voice was chilling. She had clearly rehearsed this moment, preparing for every reaction I might have. Her composure only made my anger burn hotter. "Well," I finally managed, frustration spilling into my voice, "I guess I'll call the guys and tell them I'm skipping the damn trip. We need to talk about this, and I've got a lot to figure out." I reached for my phone, but Becky grabbed my arm. No, she said firmly, meeting my gaze with unflinching determination. You're going on this trip. The kids will stay with your parents as planned. I'm not staying here alone while you sulk around trying to figure out who I'm seeing. You need this time away to come to terms with everything. And trust me, you don't want to know what will happen if you refuse. I've already made sure you won't like the consequences. Her tone was cold, calculated, and left no room for argument. I've got people who can keep tabs on everything. If you try to disrupt my life or find out more than I've told you, it'll get back to me. You just need to accept that this is the way things are now. If you don't fight me on this, I'll make sure your life stays intact. But don't make waves. She walked over to the desk and pulled a thick envelope from the drawer, handing it to me. Here, just so you know I'm serious. Inside is a detailed account of everything you've done over the past month. Read it, and you'll see how closely I've been watching. If you try to mess with me, I'll know, and I'll make sure you regret it. Then she stood and turned toward the stairs. I'm going to bed now. If you want to join me, you know where to find me. Nothing has to change unless you force it to. I sat there, stunned and trying to comprehend what had just happened. Who was this woman? What had she done to the person I thought I married? As she walked upstairs, her deliberate, confident sway didn't stir the feelings it once had. Instead, it left me cold. After a moment, I opened the envelope. Inside was a meticulous report chronicling my every move for the past month. It was shockingly detailed, even including things I'd barely noticed myself, like the time I spilled coffee on my shirt at lunch or glanced at a woman on the street. It felt invasive, almost surreal. Gathering this kind of information must have cost a fortune. Was she involved with someone powerful, a millionaire, or worse, someone dangerous? It took me 2 hours to read through everything. By the time I was done, I was shaken to my core. This wasn't just surveillance, it was control. Even things I thought were private had been laid bare. I felt violated, like my entire life had been infiltrated. As I sat there, my thoughts turned to revenge. I couldn't let her destroy my life like this. I needed a plan, a way to take back control without tipping her off. But who could I trust? My friends had always been there for me, but now I wasn't so sure. Could one of them be the man she was seeing? If I confided in the wrong person, I might ruin any chance I had of coming out ahead. Just then, Becky's voice interrupted my thoughts. "David," she called from the top of the stairs, her tone sharp and impatient. "Are you coming to bed, or are you just going to sit there brooding all night? I'm not waiting forever." Her words hung in the air as I sat frozen, consumed by anger and disbelief. My life had just been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put it back together. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her win without a fight. She turned and disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me sitting there, my thoughts spiraling out of control. I didn't join her. Instead, I spent the night on the office couch, unable to sleep. At dawn, Becky barged in, waking me up as she started preparing breakfast. Her irritation was evident, and she wasted no time letting me have it. "Get up, Dave," she barked. "Pull yourself together and get ready for work before the kids notice you didn't sleep in our room. When you get back in 2 weeks, I expect you to act like everything's normal. You already know the consequences if you try to disrupt our family. I'm willing to meet your needs occasionally, but you better hold up your end of the deal. And let me be clear, if you even think about finding someone else, I'll divorce you on the spot." Anger bubbled up inside me, and I couldn't hold it back. "Are you serious?" I shouted. "You expect me to just accept this? You get to cheat and bully me into silence, but I can't even consider moving on? How is that fair?" Becky smirked, her tone icy. "Oh, come on, Dave. You're getting plenty from me to keep you satisfied, and we both know it. If you step out, it'll only be out of spite, and that's pathetic. The only reason I'd ever end this marriage is because you can't handle your responsibilities. If you'd been able to give me what I needed, none of this would have happened. So don't start playing the sufferer now." I stammered, the words catching in my throat as my anger turned to disbelief. "I can't believe this," I finally managed. "Not once did you tell me you needed more or wanted something different. You never even hinted that something was wrong. How was I supposed to know? I've always made sure you were satisfied. Hell, more often than not, you had multiple climaxes, and now you're saying it wasn't enough? How could I know if you never told me?" Her expression was unreadable as she replied coldly, "If you're asking that now, it's too late. You've been in the dark for years, Dave. The truth is, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. You've never really known how to please me. I waited, but eventually I realized you never would. So I found someone who could. She turned toward the door, tossing over her shoulder. Now stop whining and get dressed. I've had enough of this conversation. Still reeling, I stumbled upstairs to get ready for the day. Breakfast was tense, the silence broken only when Sean, our son, looked up and asked, "What's going on?" I started to answer, but Becky cut in smoothly. "Your dad's just worried about something at work," she said with a practiced smile. "He'll be fine after the holidays." Her gaze flicked to me briefly before she returned to her meal. When I got to work, I decided to cancel the fishing trip, ignoring Becky's demand that I go. I was supposed to meet the guys at Denny's after work to load up the gear and head out. Roger was riding with me, and Don planned to drive separately since he'd have to leave midweek. I called Roger to explain. "Hey, something came up and I can't make it. You can take my truck for the gear." But Roger cut me off. "Not happening, Dave," he said firmly. "I just talked to Becky. She told me you might try to back out and said you've been under a lot of stress. She even checked with your office to make sure you didn't have any pressing work. I promised her I'd make sure you went. If I have to drag you there myself, I will. You're coming, and that's final." My stomach twisted with unease. Was Roger involved? Becky had said she'd be gone for the weekend, but Roger was coming with me. Then again, Kenny was staying home until midweek. Could it be him or someone else entirely? I was trapped, and I needed a plan. But Becky and her network were watching my every move. Credit cards, phone calls, even cash withdrawals. Anything out of the ordinary would raise alarms. As I sat at my desk, lost in thought, my phone buzzed. It was Becky, and her tone was sharp the moment I answered. "David, I told you to go on this trip," she said curtly. "Roger just called and said you tried to bail. Let me be clear, this is your final warning. Push me again and you'll regret it. You'll lose everything, including the kids. Do I make myself clear?" The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me shaken. That evening, I met the guys at Denny's as planned. While they laughed and joked, I sat quietly, brooding. Finally, Don turned to me. "What's up with you, man?" I hesitated, then muttered, "Becky's got some crazy idea in her head, and I don't know how to handle it. If she's serious, my marriage is over." Roger exchanged a glance with Don. "Man, Becky called me this morning," Roger said. "She told me you've been under a lot of stress and might try to cancel. She asked me to make sure you came, said you needed this trip to clear your head." Don nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you've been off lately, not yourself. A change of scenery will do you good. Don't worry, I've got plenty of beer and whiskey in the car," he added with a grin. Nothing ever stopped us from having a good time at the cabin. Besides, without the wives, it's just more booze and bigger lies. Feeling cornered, I followed them out to the car. The drive to the stream was quiet, and by the time we arrived 2 hours later, I was already dreading the days ahead. But for now, I poured myself a drink and tried to push the chaos out of my mind. The following morning, both Don and Roger were eager to get to the river, so we left the cabin early. For a few hours, I managed to push the chaos of the past few days out of my mind. The rhythm of casting my line and the quiet of the water provided some much-needed distraction. But as we made our way back to the cabin, my thoughts drifted back to Becky. I couldn't wrap my head around everything she'd said. Could she really have meant it all? Her cold, calculated delivery left little room for doubt. What the hell was I supposed to do now? That night, instead of focusing on the mess I needed to sort out, I let Don and Roger convince me to have a few drinks after dinner. We sat around the cabin, swapping old stories and laughing, but my heart wasn't in it. I was lost in my thoughts, replaying Becky's words over and over, until Don interrupted me. "All right, Dave," he said, leaning forward. "You've been sitting there looking like you've lost your best friend. What's going on? Spill it." For a moment, I hesitated, but then I thought, what's the point of keeping this to myself? If anyone could help me make sense of it, it was these two. We'd been through everything together since we were kids. If I couldn't trust them, who could I trust? So I laid it all out, how things with Becky had been falling apart, how our closeness had been dwindling for years, and finally what she had confessed on Thursday night. I didn't hold back, recounting every word and every threat she had thrown at me. When I finished, Don leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of disbelief and concern. "Dave, are you sure you've got this right?" he asked. "We've known Becky for years. This just doesn't sound like her. She's always been, well, kind, supportive, loyal." "I know," I said, shaking my head. "But that's exactly what she said, Don. I wish I was making it up." Don sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. Man, if she really said all that, you've got some tough choices ahead. She's not wrong about some of it, though. If you try to leave, it'll be a disaster. Splitting up would tear the kids apart. And we both know the courts almost always favor the mom in custody cases. Unless you can prove Becky's unfit, you're not getting full custody. Even then, you'd still be paying child support, medical bills, and college expenses. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. And then, there's alimony. Since Becky doesn't work, you'd be on the hook for that until she remarries, if she ever does. You'd probably lose the house, too, or have to sell it and split what's left. Same with your savings and retirement. Divorce would leave you with barely enough to scrape by. Hearing this from Don, a lawyer, made it even harder to swallow. I sat in stunned silence as he continued. And Dave, you can't go after her lover. If you do, and something happens, you'll be the one in trouble. Becky could report you, and if her lover presses charges, you'd be facing serious criminal penalties. As your friend, I get it. I'd want to do the same thing. But as your lawyer, I have to tell you not to. The best advice I can give you is to let it go. Keep things as normal as possible and hope Becky eventually changes her mind. I stared at him in disbelief. Don, how can you even say that? If Shelley did something like this to you, would you just let it slide? Would you let her humiliate you like that? Don looked uncomfortable. No, he admitted. I'd be just as pissed as you are. But Shelley wouldn't do that. She knows what we have is good, and she'd never risk it. Becky's got you in a corner, Dave, and fighting back might only make things worse. Roger chimed in then, his voice unusually serious. Dave, listen, from what you've told us, Becky's got eyes everywhere. If you try to dig into her business, she'll know. Hell, she might already know we're having this conversation. You need to tread carefully. My stomach dropped. Crap, I muttered. I didn't even think about that. Roger grinned, his usual humor returning. Well, if you're already screwed, you might as well have another drink. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise, unable to sleep. I grabbed my gear and headed upstream to my favorite fishing spot, hoping the solitude would clear my mind. Just as I started casting, my phone buzzed. I was surprised it had a signal out here. When I saw Becky's name on the screen, I hesitated before letting it go to voicemail. Later, I listened to the message. Becky's voice was calm, almost too composed. Hey, honey. I heard you got some good advice from Don last night. I hope you're planning to follow it. You're a great provider and father, and I don't want to lose that. But if you do something reckless, I'll take the kids and leave. Now go have some fun. I stared at the phone, stunned. How the hell did she know what we talked about? There was no cell service at the cabin, and we didn't have a landline. Was my gear bugged? A wave of dread hit me as I realized how deep this went. If she was monitoring me this closely, what else had she done? Unbeknownst to me, Don and Roger were watching from a distance. As I stared at my phone, they exchanged smirks. Think it's working? Roger asked, chuckling. Don shrugged. Let's keep it going for a while. If we play it right, Becky gets what she wants and we stay in her good graces. She'll do whatever it takes to keep this arrangement going. And if Dave ever catches on, we'll spin it like we're just helping him out. Roger laughed. Works for me. And hey, maybe we'll even get her to loosen up on the time constraints. Imagine how much more fun this could be. Meanwhile, I stayed at the river until almost noon, my mind churning. I couldn't stop wondering who Becky was seeing, how long it had been going on, and why she'd betrayed me. I wanted answers, I wanted revenge, and most of all, I wanted this nightmare to end. On Friday evening, Becky sat on the couch, unable to hide her excitement. She glanced at the man beside her, her anticipation evident. The day had been a long tease, and now she was eager for what was about to unfold. I've been waiting all day for this, she said, her voice low and suggestive. I can't wait for the others to get here. Isn't Don supposed to arrive early Wednesday? Yeah, he'll be here, the man replied with a sly grin. Then you'll have the two of us for 2 full nights before I have to go babysit your dear husband. Becky's lips curled into a wicked smile. It's going to be amazing when all 3 of us can be together at the same time. I'm tired of juggling just 1 or at most 2 of you. After everything you've shown me, Dave could never satisfy me again. The man laughed. You think we've covered all our bases? I hope so, she said, her tone softening slightly. I still care about Dave. He's a great dad and a steady provider. I don't want to lose that. Don't worry, he said confidently. We've planned this out carefully. The only thing that could mess it up is if Dave starts sniffing around and talking to our wives. We've had a good thing going for 3 years. Honestly, we probably should have left well enough alone instead of getting greedy." Becky raised an eyebrow. "Greedy? You're the one who kept pushing for more time with me. Don't try to pin this on me." The man chuckled. "Fair enough. I can't deny I wanted more. Spending entire nights or even trips with you is hard to resist. But we might have underestimated Dave. He's more stubborn than we thought." "Well," Becky said with a sigh, "the leverage we have on him should keep him in line. And tracking his finances has been effective so far. The banks put limits on his cash withdrawals, but I can't block him from writing checks." "At least we can trace those," he replied with a nod. "Still, maybe pushing him to stay home with the kids wasn't the smartest move. We should have left his office alone," Becky giggled. "If I hadn't stayed home, we wouldn't be enjoying all this, would we? A couple of evenings a month with you wasn't enough. Now, thanks to our little plan, I get as much as I want." Meanwhile, at the river, Dave sat sullen and distracted. His friends tried to lift his spirits, but nothing seemed to work. Finally, they resorted to getting him drunk. Late Tuesday night, after Dave passed out, Don and Roger stepped outside to talk. "I'm starting to worry," Roger said, frowning. "Dave's not backing down. He's more determined than ever to leave Becky and go after her lover. If he snaps, how do we contain this? What started as a way to keep him in line is backfiring." Don sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Relax. If it comes to it, I'll help Becky with the divorce and make sure she comes out looking innocent. Worst case, they split, and we still keep seeing her. Sure, it's fun while she's married, but it wouldn't be the end of the world." Roger looked uneasy. "But what if he figures out what's going on and tells our wives?" "We'll deal with it if it happens," Don said flatly. "If push comes to shove, we might need to apply some pressure. Let's see how the next week goes before we overreact." Inside, Dave stirred, catching fragments of their conversation. Though the words were muffled, he picked up enough to piece together their intentions. His anger simmered as the realization set in. Becky's betrayal wasn't just her doing. His supposed friends were complicit. Before drifting back into a fitful sleep, he resolved to handle things his own way. Over the next few days, Dave withdrew further, speaking less and keeping his plans to himself. When Roger or Kenny pressed him, all he muttered was, "I'm going to find out who's behind this and they'll regret it." Finally, the trip ended. Roger rode silently with Dave on the drive back while Kenny followed in his car. Once they reached an area with cell service, Kenny called Don. Don and Becky were sitting in Dave's living room when Kenny's call came through. "He's angrier than ever," Kenny reported. "If anything, this trip just fueled his resolve. We need to dial things back for now. If he uncovers too much, it'll blow up in our faces." Becky's face paled as she listened, tears welling in her eyes. Her breathing grew unsteady, and Don reached over to comfort her, his expression hardening. "Becky," he said firmly, "don't worry. If he doesn't calm down, we'll take action. On Monday, we'll file for divorce if necessary. I can freeze his accounts, personal and business. We'll argue he might try to hide assets or sabotage his own company. The courts will side with us." Becky nodded, her voice trembling. "I just didn't expect him to fight back like this." Don tightened his grip on her hand. "It'll be fine. We'll keep control. Dave won't know what hit him." That Friday night, Dave stepped into his house to find Becky lounging on the couch. Her eyes were puffy and red as if she'd been crying, but her relaxed demeanor told a different story. She was wearing one of his shirts and nothing else. As he passed, he noticed subtle but unmistakable signs that she had been with someone else recently. A wave of rage surged through him. Becky met his glare with a defiant expression, as if daring him to speak. Dave clenched his fists but walked past her without saying a word. Becky trailed him into the bedroom. When he stepped into the shower, she tried to join him, but he shoved her away. "Get the hell out!" he snapped. "I thought we might be able to work through this, but seeing you like this makes it clear. You've gone too far. You might destroy me, but I swear I'll make you and your lover, or lovers, pay for this." After finishing his shower, Dave began packing everything he could fit into his truck. Becky stayed in the living room, speaking calmly on the phone as he moved back and forth between the bedroom and the driveway. Her unbothered tone only stoked his anger. Before leaving, Dave tried to access their joint bank accounts using the computer, but he was locked out. The password had been changed. His jaw tightened as he turned to see Becky standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. "I hoped you'd come to your senses before it came to this," she said, her voice laced with regret. "You're making a huge mistake, Dave. I love you more than anyone I've ever known. But if you keep acting like this, you'll ruin everything, including the business. For your information, I've hired Don as my lawyer. He's already been briefed about your behavior and he'll be in touch soon. Dave froze, stunned. Don, his closest friend since college, had sided with Becky? His disbelief quickly turned to fury, but he held his tongue. Without another word, he stormed out of the house, his mind racing. He drove to his office complex, deciding to stay there for the time being. At the security gate, he stopped to speak with the guard. "Listen," he said firmly. "I'm dealing with a personal situation. My wife and her accomplice have been threatening me. I need you to increase security and make sure no unauthorized people come onto the property." The guard nodded, and Dave drove in. The next morning, as he was leaving the complex to grab breakfast, a man approached him at the gate. "Are you Dave?" the man asked. "Yes," Dave replied, wary. "You've been served," the man said, handing him an envelope before walking away. Dave opened it to find a restraining order. He was barred from coming within 100 yards of Becky, their children, or their home. Additionally, the order required court approval for any transactions involving his personal or business accounts, effectively freezing his access to funds. A court date for the divorce case was set for Monday. Shaken, Dave decided to visit his assistant, Gertrude, for help. When she opened the door, her face filled with concern. "Dave, you look awful. What's going on?" she asked. "I need someone to talk to," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know who else to turn to." "Come in," Gertrude said, stepping aside. "Do you want some coffee?" Dave followed her to the kitchen, where her husband Thaddeus was sitting at the table with plates of eggs and toast in front of him. "Sorry to interrupt," Dave said awkwardly, taking a step back. "I shouldn't have come. I'll leave you to your morning." Thaddeus glanced up, his expression serious. "You look like you're at the end of your rope, Dave. Sit down. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out." Reluctantly, Dave sat and began to recount everything: the restraining order, the frozen accounts, and Don's betrayal. He detailed Becky's actions over the past 2 weeks and how his so-called friends had been trying to manipulate him into accepting her affair. "I can't even buy breakfast," he admitted, his voice shaking. "All my credit cards are frozen. I'm trapped, and everyone I thought I could trust has turned against me." Gertrude leaned back, visibly shaken. "I can't believe Becky would do this to you," she said softly. She looked at her husband. "Thad, we have to help him. He can stay here, and we can lend him some money to get through this." Thaddeus nodded. "Absolutely." Dave buried his face in his hands, overwhelmed by anger and helplessness. Thaddeus studied him for a moment, then spoke decisively. "First, we need to make sure you're not being monitored," he said. "Strip down and hand me your clothes." Dave blinked, confused. "What?" "You heard me," Thaddeus replied. "Go shower. I'll get you something clean to wear, and I'll check your clothes for bugs." Feeling ridiculous but desperate, Dave complied. After changing into a set of Thaddeus's old clothes, he rejoined them in the basement. They gathered in a small, windowless storage room where Thaddeus had set up a makeshift workspace. "We need to act carefully," Thaddeus said. "If Becky's tracking you, we can't leave a trail. I'll reach out to a few people I know who can help. You'll stay under the radar, and I'll handle the communication." Gertrude handed Dave a stack of cash. "This should help you get started," she said gently. "We'll figure this out, Dave." For the first time in days, Dave felt a glimmer of hope. As they sat together, making plans, he vowed to fight back. Whatever it took, he wasn't going to let Becky or anyone else control him any longer. On Sunday afternoon, Becky, Don, Kenny, and Roger gathered at Becky's house. The morning had been a hedonistic escape, but now they sat in the living room, their conversation shifting to more pressing matters. "This whole situation is making me nervous," Roger admitted, lighting a cigarette. "We've been working on this plan for years, and now it feels like it's spiraling out of control. Dave isn't falling in line, and if he figures everything out, it'll blow up in our faces. Maybe we should back off for a while." "Stop panicking," Don snapped. "Dave's stuck. He can't touch his money, and we're keeping a close eye on him. We'll know what he's planning before he even makes a move." Kenny frowned. "What about yesterday? He spent hours at his secretary's house with her husband. We didn't hear anything from them. What if they're helping him?" "It doesn't matter," Don said dismissively. "We've got all the leverage we need. He's boxed in." As the group's attention shifted back to their indulgent behavior, they failed to notice a man standing outside the window. He held a camera and microphone aimed directly at them, silently capturing every word. The next morning, Dave began the difficult process of finding a new lawyer. He made several calls and arranged interviews with 2 attorneys. The betrayal by Don, who had handled all his legal affairs for years, and was now representing Becky, left him feeling lost and unsure of who he could trust. After careful consideration, Dave chose to work with Sally Hawk, a well-regarded attorney with a reputation for being both sharp and compassionate. During their first meeting, Sally quickly mapped out a plan. Step 1 was to petition the court to unfreeze Dave's business accounts to ensure he could maintain his livelihood. She also recommended hiring a private investigator to monitor Becky's activities. Dave approved wiretapping and video surveillance at his home to gather evidence. Sally then filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity, setting the legal process in motion. Later that evening, Tad, Gertrude's husband, handed Dave a USB drive containing footage he had recorded over the weekend. Watching the videos was excruciating. Seeing Becky intimately involved with Don, Kenny, and Roger, the people he had considered his closest friends, left him shattered. The betrayal was more profound than he could have imagined, fueling his heartbreak and rage. At least now, he knew the full extent of the betrayal. The next morning, Dave arrived at his office early and began creating multiple copies of the damning footage. He burned it onto CDs, carefully labeling each one. He sent copies to each of his friends' wives and gave another to Sally for safekeeping. He placed the original in a safe deposit box, ensuring it would remain secure. But Dave didn't stop there. He uploaded the footage to several amateur adult websites, using the real names of all the participants. He set up a pay-per-view system for the video, directing the proceeds to an offshore bank account. For added irony, Dave used Don's office computer to set up the accounts, ensuring that any trace of the uploads would lead straight back to him. He also emailed select stills from the footage to Becky's friends and family, ensuring word spread quickly. To remain untraceable, he used public computers at the local college library. Dave's familiarity with the college's lax security worked to his advantage. He knew that students often left their accounts logged in, allowing him to use them undetected. Additionally, the lack of surveillance cameras made it nearly impossible to track his activities. By Wednesday, the consequences of Dave's actions began to unfold. Calls poured in from shocked and outraged individuals who had seen the video. Dave answered each one with grim satisfaction, relishing the disruption. That evening, Becky finally called, her voice trembling with anger and tears. "How could you do this, Dave?" she cried. "I thought you loved me. I told you it was just Zex, something you couldn't give me. How could you destroy my life like this?" Dave's laugh was cold. "Becky, I didn't destroy your life. You did. I warned you that there would be consequences, and now you're living them. Honestly, I'm sure you've been cheating on me for years. All those little things I ignored make sense now. This is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd never crossed me." Later that night, Dave's sister called, her voice dripping with sarcasm and venom. Well, well," she said with a laugh. "It looks like you finally figured out what your perfect wife has been up to. Let me guess. You're the one behind that video? Bravo! Now I think Becky and I can share the boys. I didn't even know she was screwing them until I got this." Her laughter sent chills down Dave's spine before she hung up abruptly. The night grew darker when Don called. His voice was a furious roar. "You're a goddamn fool, Dave," he shouted. "You'll regret this. I'll take everything from you, your money, your business, your family. I've been screwing Becky since high school, and I'll keep doing it long after you're gone. By the time I'm done, you'll be penniless and forgotten." Dave listened silently, letting Don vent. The entire call was recorded by the office phone system, a system Don himself had recommended, complete with a recorded warning that all calls were monitored for legal purposes. In his rage, Don either forgot or ignored it. Becky's parents also called, their tone far more subdued. Her mother was in tears. "Dave, how could you do this to Becky?" she pleaded. "I know she's hurt you, but airing this so publicly is too cruel. Couldn't you have handled it more privately?" Dave remained calm, knowing he had only just begun. Every move he made was calculated, and the fallout was unfolding exactly as he intended. By the end of the day, Dave felt a grim sense of vindication. His office's phone system had recorded every call, including Don's threatening tirades. Dave knew this evidence would be crucial in the battles that lay ahead. The most damning piece of evidence, however, came from Tad's footage. While the private investigator Sally hired managed to uncover a few incriminating phone calls, most of their findings were circumstantial and wouldn't hold up in court. Tad's recordings, however, were irrefutable. Sally wasted no time filing a complaint against Don with the state bar. His unethical behavior and explicit threats resulted in the immediate suspension of his law license, and shortly thereafter, he was permanently disbarred. The divorce proceedings were swift and ruthless. Becky's case fell apart under the weight of the evidence presented against her. In the end, she was awarded only 25% of the couple's assets, while Dave retained full control of his business. Custody of their children went to Dave, thanks in part to a devastating photo introduced during the trial. The photograph, captured inadvertently by Tad's friend, showed more than just the explicit acts taking place in Becky's living room. In the background, through the glass patio door, Dave's 8-year-old daughter could be seen, her wide, horrified eyes locked on the scene unfolding inside. The image spoke volumes, cementing Becky's reckless disregard for her children's well-being. The judge didn't hesitate to award Dave full custody, citing Becky's irresponsibility and moral failings as critical factors. Dave didn't stop there. He pursued civil lawsuits against Don for breaching attorney-client privilege and for representing Becky while maintaining a romantic relationship with her. After months of legal wrangling, the court awarded Dave $1.3 million in damages. Don's actions had not only ruined his professional reputation, but also opened him up to significant legal and financial penalties. Don's disgrace didn't end with the lawsuit. His ex-wife Shelley seized the opportunity to finalize her divorce, securing nearly all their marital assets. By the time Dave's case and Shelley's divorce were resolved, Don was left financially ruined and socially ostracized. Kenny's downfall followed a similar path. His wife Pam filed for divorce, citing infidelity and moral corruption. The settlement left Kenny with little more than his pride, his reputation in shambles. Roger, surprisingly, managed to avoid an immediate divorce. His wife, Trixie, had not only been aware of his actions, but had actively participated in the escapades with Don and Kenny. For a time, the unconventional arrangement seemed stable. However, the dynamics quickly unraveled. Don and Kenny, left without homes after their divorces, moved in with Roger and Trixie. What began as a temporary solution turned into a disaster. Don and Kenny monopolized Trixie's attention, often engaging in their escapades while Roger was excluded. Tensions grew and resentment simmered. One evening, Roger's frustration boiled over. In a fit of rage, he attacked Don and Kenny, leading to a violent altercation. Outnumbered, Roger was severely knocked and hospitalized. Criminal charges were filed, and Don and Kenny were convicted of aggravated attack, each receiving a 1-year prison sentence. Following the incident, Trixie filed for divorce, ending their volatile marriage. Nearly a year after the chaos, Dave sat in his office, poring over paperwork. Across from him, Gertrude skimmed a news article detailing the latest scandal involving Don, Kenny, and Roger. Their lives had devolved into one public disgrace after another, with the brawl over Trixie being just one of many sordid episodes. "Dave," Gertrude asked cautiously, setting the article down, "have you talked to Becky since all this ended? I know she has supervised visitation with the kids." Dave leaned back, exhaling deeply. "Only when absolutely necessary," he said. "And even then, it's strictly about the kids. If I could avoid her completely, I would." Gertrude nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I get it. It's just, for so long, it seemed like you two were unbreakable. Do you ever wonder why she did it? How does someone destroy their own family like that?" Dave was silent for a long moment, his jaw tightening. Finally, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a worn folder. He slid it across the desk to Gertrude. "I don't know why I kept this," he admitted, "and I don't know why I read it. About 7 months ago, Becky's mom came to my office crying. She handed me this letter and begged me to read it, so I did." Gertrude unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. It was unmistakably Becky's, and the raw emotion in the words was palpable.
"Dear David, I know I've lost the right to call you mine, but you'll always be the man I love. Even though I know there's no way back for us, I have to lay bare my heart. I never set out to hurt you. I never meant to betray you, but I did. And I know you'll never forgive me. You knew about my past with Don, Kenny, and Roger from our high school days, just like I knew about yours with their girlfriends. Back then, none of it seemed to matter. But the first time I was unfaithful after we got married, it was different. It happened the weekend of Don and Shelley's Valentine's Day party, our 9th anniversary. You were swamped with a major case and couldn't attend. I felt lonely and drank too much. That's not an excuse, just the truth. Don offered to drive me home and Kenny followed in another car to give him a ride back. During the drive, Don brought up old memories from high school, the times he and Kenny had been with me. It awakened something I couldn't ignore. By the time we got to the house, they insisted on helping me inside. I tried to resist, but not hard enough. That night, I crossed a line I can never uncross. We slept together for nearly an hour, and I felt things I hadn't in years. It became a pattern after that. Every time you were away, they'd come over. Sometimes Don and Kenny, sometimes Don and Roger, and occasionally all three. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. At some point, Don suggested I confess everything to you and ask for your blessing. He convinced me you loved me enough to accept it. He said you'd never risk a divorce, not with the kids and the business at stake. I believed him. I'm so sorry, David. I was weak. I let myself become dependent on the thrill and the pleasure. I hope someday you can forgive me. Yours always, Becky.
Gertrude placed the letter on the desk, her hands trembling. She blinked back tears as she looked at Dave. She really did love you, Dave, she said softly. But I also think Don preyed on her weaknesses. A real friend wouldn't have done this to either of you. He manipulated her. Dave nodded, his expression grim. I've thought the same thing, but I also think Becky left a lot out of that letter. Even before this mess, she was always too close to Don. It caused fights between us more than once. He hesitated, his voice tightening. After everything, I had a DNA test done on the kids. The relief I felt when I saw the results, you can't imagine. His shoulders sagged as he sighed, his tone softening. I think Becky convinced herself she loved me, but it wasn't the kind of love that really matters. I was a good provider, a stable father, an easy option. But in the end, she was selfish. She cared more about her desires than anything else. That's why she cheated. And that's why she didn't stop. Gertrude reached across the desk and placed her hand gently on his. You'll find someone who truly loves you, Dave. Someone who deserves the man you are. Dave smiled faintly, though his eyes remained distant. Maybe. But for now, I'm not looking for that. Right now, I just want peace. Years drifted by like the quiet current of the river, carrying with them the anguish, betrayal, and chaos that had once consumed Dave's life. The scars of the past remained etched into his memory, but they had dulled with time, becoming reminders of lessons learned rather than open wounds. Life had moved forward, not in a straight line, but in a series of steps, sometimes hesitant, sometimes bold, towards something resembling peace. The kids, Sean and Maddie, had been his compass during the storm. Despite their young age during the upheaval, they'd shown remarkable resilience. Sean, once shy and uncertain, grew into a confident and thoughtful young man, his father's steady guidance shaping his sense of responsibility and kindness. Maddie, whose wide eyes had once glimpsed a scene no child should witness, blossomed into an artist with a deep capacity for empathy, channeling her emotions into vivid paintings that often took Dave's breath away. Dave had poured himself into fatherhood, becoming both the nurturer and the disciplinarian, the confidant and the cheerleader. Their small family found strength in routine and tradition. Sunday night movie marathons, camping trips in the summer, and quiet mornings baking pancakes in the kitchen. Each shared laugh and small victory mended the fractures left behind by Becky's choices. Becky's presence remained, but only on the periphery. Her court-mandated supervised visits with the children were infrequent and often strained. She seemed a shadow of the woman she once was, her fiery confidence replaced by a quiet unease, her defiance tempered by the weight of her own mistakes. While Dave maintained a polite but distant relationship with her for the children's sake, he no longer felt anger when he saw her. Instead, there was pity, a recognition of how her decisions had trapped her in a cycle of regret. Dave's business, too, became a testament to his resilience. After narrowly avoiding collapse during the legal battles, he worked tirelessly to rebuild it into a thriving enterprise. His employees, many of whom had stood by him during the darkest days, became like a second family. Together, they celebrated milestones and weathered challenges, forging a workplace culture rooted in loyalty and mutual respect. Amid the chaos of rebuilding his life, Dave hadn't expected to find love again. The idea seemed impossible, too risky, too fraught with the potential for more pain. And yet, life had its own plans. Amelia came into his life not as a whirlwind, but as a steady breeze, gentle and unassuming. They met at a community fundraiser for the local library, where she was volunteering as an organizer. Her easy laugh and genuine curiosity about his life drew him in, and soon, casual conversations over coffee turned into long walks and heartfelt confessions. Amelia was different from Becky in every way. Where Becky had been fiery and impulsive, Amelia was thoughtful and patient. She listened without judgment, offering insights that were both gentle and profound. For months, Dave hesitated to let her into his heart, fearing the vulnerability that love demanded. But Amelia's quiet persistence and unwavering kindness gradually melted his defenses. She wasn't just someone to fill the void. She was a partner, a confidant, and a source of light in a life that had once been shrouded in darkness. The children adored Amelia. Maddie often spent hours with her in the garden, learning about plants and sketching flowers for her art projects. Sean, now a teenager, found in Amelia a steady source of advice and encouragement as he navigated the complexities of high school. For the first time since the divorce, their family felt whole, not in the way it once had been, but in a way that was stronger and more authentic. The years brought new challenges, as life always does. Sean's decision to pursue college out of state was bittersweet for Dave, who had grown accustomed to their close-knit routines. Maddie's struggles with anxiety tested his patience and empathy, but he tackled each moment with the determination of a father who had seen what was at stake. Through it all, Amelia stood by his side, her presence a constant reminder that even the most broken hearts could heal. One evening, years after the initial storm had passed, Dave found himself back by the river. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the water. This had been his sanctuary during the hardest times, a place where he could think, rage, or simply exist. Now it felt like a monument to how far he had come. He closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over him, and allowed himself a moment of gratitude. The house he returned to was no longer a reminder of betrayal. It was a home, filled with laughter and warmth. Amelia and Maddie were in the kitchen, experimenting with a new recipe, their voices mingling in easy conversation. Sean was visiting for the weekend, sprawled on the couch with a book, his presence grounding the house in a way only he could. As Dave stepped inside, Amelia looked up and smiled, her expression one of quiet joy. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Long day?" she asked softly. "Not anymore," he replied, his voice filled with a contentment he never thought he'd feel again. Later that night, as the family gathered around the dining table, the air was filled with stories and laughter. The weight of the past was still there, but it no longer defined them. Instead, it had become a thread in the fabric of their lives, a reminder of what they had endured and the strength they had found in each other. In that moment, Dave realized that while life had taken him through storms he never anticipated, it had also brought him to a place of peace and fulfillment. He had lost much, but he had gained something greater, a deeper understanding of love, resilience, and the beauty of new beginnings. As he raised his glass in a quiet toast, he didn't speak, but his heart whispered a simple truth. The past was behind him, and the future was his to write.